Coming up, we look back on the life of the late Navajo leader and elder Peterson Zah. Meet the women warriors of the 1973 Wounded Knee occupation, plus a policy director from NIEA recounts this year's Hill Week. Plus, check out what happened at IndigiPop X. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start our newscast in California, where allies of the sacred site Oak Flat are gearing up for another day in court. On Tuesday, the Ninth Circuit Court will hear arguments in the case Apache Stronghold versus the United States. Oak Flat, which is located in southern Arizona, is currently under threat of being destroyed to mine for copper ore. It is sacred to several Western Apache nations. Leading the project is Resolution Copper, a multinational mining corporation. Tuesday's arguments come after a years-long legal battle between the tribes and the mining company. The court is expected to hear the case in front of a full panel of 11 judges. The Apaches are being represented by the law firm Beckett. Attorneys for the indigenous advocates have long argued that the Apaches have a right to continue their religious observances at Oak Flat, and therefore mining should be stopped. Aside from the courts, the Apache people have also fought in the U.S. Congress to get legislation passed to stop the mining. Well, a mountain lion who is a symbol for wildlife conservation efforts has been laid to rest. The animal, known as P22, was buried on his ancestral homelands in the Santa Monica Mountains in a private ceremony earlier this month after being euthanized. P22 lived near the Hollywood sign. He became an ambassador in nature conservation as well as the California mountain lion population. After being struck by a vehicle and captured, officials said they euthanized him for 3 reasons: trauma from being hit, diseases, and old age. His return ceremony was done in part by several Native people and included a private gravesite, songs, prayers, and sage smoke. In a statement, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, who held P22 remains in a freezer after his death, called the burial a historically significant ceremony. In New Mexico, lawmakers are celebrating a soon-to-be law that aims to give culturally relevant education to Native children. House Bill 148 passed the New Mexico House and Senate earlier this month with unanimous approval. It requires the state's Early Childhood and Education Department to provide funding for programs on tribal lands to be administered within the cultural teachings of those respective tribes. This will ultimately result in cultural education being taught in tribal Head Start programs around New Mexico. The bill was sponsored by State Representative Derek Lenti, who is a citizen of Sandia Pueblo. The bill will now head to State Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's desk to be signed into law. Now to Australia, where officials are dealing with the fallout of an Indigenous child who spent 45 days in solitary confinement. The 13-year-old boy, referred to as Jack, reportedly spent 60 days in custody. He was being held while awaiting trial for fighting another 13-year-old. Jack's detention included 6 days in an adult prison and several stints in juvenile solitary confinement, the longest being 22 consecutive days. At one point, point, he was reported to have flooded his cell after being denied drinking water. Jack was ultimately released with only a verbal reprimand. State Human Rights Director Scott McDougall feared this was not an isolated case. Data shows Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders were 12 times more likely to be imprisoned than non-Indigenous Australians. It is estimated that 90% of juvenile detainees are Indigenous youth in the country's northern region. Switching gears, if you ever thought about a career in writing, we have more info on an opportunity that could get your foot in the door. The 3rd annual Native American Writers Seminar has an open call for applications. Starting in June, the month-long intensive program helps to develop emerging Native writers for TV and film. And it also provides a getaway for Indigenous storytellers who want professional and creative mentorship. The seminar is presented by the Native American Media Alliance in partnership with the Cherokee Nation Film Office. Ian Scoterin, Director of Strategy for the Media Alliance, says the program works as the first step to writing for current shows. This year's early deadline to apply is March 27th. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Navajo elder and leader Peterson Zah died last week at age 85. He led the nation as chairman in the 1980s and was elected Navajo's first president after its government reorganized in the 1990s. To many, he was a role model and mentor, including to Jaynie Parrish. We have this interview from January 2022 when Parrish sat down with Zah at his home in Window Rock, Arizona. At the time, he had just been honored by the Grand Canyon Trust for his service. She asked what stood out for him in his career.
One of them is probably the development of the Permanent Fund for the Navajo Nation. As you know, the Navajo Nation lived off mineral lease income. They make mineral leases with companies such as coal, and all of the other minerals that we have here on the res, including the one that I think that did a devastating job in a negative way, which is the uranium. And so they lived off the annual income of those companies making the lease payment that they have with the Navajo Nation. So when I became the tribal chair, I've heard a lot of complaints about some of those companies, and it will take you to a position that you need to establish, which is that maybe that's not a way to build a nation, because what we're trying to do on a Navajo is really build a nation that we like to work with. And so we decided as a group that what we should do is establish a permanent fund. That way we don't have to rely on income from mineral leases from companies, and we'll have our own money that we can generate through interest earned each year, and then leave the principal in safe places with the banks and trust companies. And that way we have a steady income that comes in each year to do the project that we need to do. We used to have around maybe 8, 9, 10,000. We're right over 15, almost 20,000 students that are applying for a scholarship. Of that number that we now have in college, even if you educate only 1 or 2, they get their degree, they're equipped to come back to the Navajo Nation. You never know how much they can do at those local school districts, for example. Organizing the community, organizing the youth, so that they don't have to sit around, not do anything, and idle. Uh, uh, it's one of those things that I think they need to learn how to do, is to really create their own things that they have passion for, and just provide them with resources such as education and encouragement from families, their grandparents, and help them. Because even if you go on to college and get your degree or master's degree, you still don't really know what the local community wants done back in your community. So you need the advice, a sense of direction and an encouragement from the elderly people, because they live there all their life and they know what's needed. And all they need to do is work with the youth that's trained in the white man's ways to accomplish certain things. But when it comes to the local community and the Navajo people, they have to rely on that. One has to feel good when they are helping somebody. You have to have a passion for that. You can't say to yourself, well, they gave me all this problem, here's the way I'm going to solve it my way. You can't do that. You have to work with them. You have to also encourage them. The concept that they're able and capable and have the resources to resolve some of those issues. And so you put it back on them and say, okay, why don't we look at it? We, not me. And I think to people, that's really, really important, because they're helping resolve their own problem. It's almost just like any student. You don't tell a student and say, okay, to solve your problem, I want you to come here at 8 o'clock each morning, and then I'll teach you or I'll show you. You have to put some of that responsibility on their own shoulders.
That was the late Navajo leader and elder Peterson Zah. Remembering other notable leaders, the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee made household names out of men like Carter Camp, Dennis Banks, and Russell Means. But women also played powerful roles in the occupation. They were honored recently during the 50th anniversary commemorations of the key event in American Indian movement history. ICT's Shirley, Sneve, and Stewart Huntington were there.
The Warrior Women Project celebrated the women who put their lives on the line in 1973 at Wounded Knee. The project gathers oral histories from the women of the Red Power movement. Some of the veterans of the occupation were in Porcupine to share their stories. Lavita Yigo talked about the spiritual awakening she underwent when she joined AIM.
I was not taught my Kiowa traditional ways. I didn't know anything about my Kiowa ways, but it taught me when I went to Wounded Knee of the spirituality of what it was all about. Well, AIM was all about, and I wanted that. I was hungry for something for that, and I found it through the American Indian movement. I found my spirituality.
About 200 people came to Porcupine, like Diane Bird, who left her teaching job in California to join the occupation. She returned to Pine Ridge for the 50th anniversary commemoration.
I was part of security working with these guys, and they set up a radio, and there was little radios in every bunker, and we kept in touch with each other, and they would ask, and it was controlled. There was a head of security, and the security would know where the people in the bunkers were and what level of fire to respond to, whether it was 100%, 50%, or hold your fire, period. Because we didn't have that many guns, and we didn't have that many bullets for those guns. We were surrounded by federal marshals, by FBI, with tanks, with all the latest weapons, like even from the Army, and we didn't know it, but we learned about that later. And all we had were like little rabbit plunkers, that kind of thing.
Madonna Thunderhawk has participated in every major Red Power operation from Alcatraz to Standing Rock. She says it's no surprise to find women at the forefront.
And when the Red Power movement came, you know, in those days, your community was the ones that made those decisions and decided how things were going to run. So it was automatically a matriarchal system. Still is today. But we don't have to constantly make a big issue of it and run around and, because it's culture, it's tradition. It's the way it is.
Tradition, yes, but the women of Wounded Knee still inspire.
Their actions in coming together and reclaiming their rights as Lakota warriors, Lakota matriarchs, they did that for us. They made a everlasting imprint on generations and generations, bringing back the strength and bringing back the ability for us as, Lakota people to be able to be proud of who we are.
Definitely found the women speaking today to be so inspiring. About a year ago, there was a film screening at the Fargo Theater, and so I was able to sit down with Madonna and her team and her daughter, and so it was a very rich moment to be in the presence of giants that have paved the way for us. But yes, definitely find inspiration from them, and hope to continue pushing the work towards justice forward for all of us.
Pushing forward with a powerful message.
I'm not only a survivor of Wounded Knee, I'm a survivor of rape and abuse, domestic violence. I'm a survivor of those three. So I call myself, I used to be in the victim stage, or think I was a victim. I'm no longer a victim.
That's a good message.
Yeah. And if you're in that kind of trouble, get help. There's help out there. Get brave enough. Get courage in your heart to take a stand for yourself. That's what it's all about. And that's what AIM taught me. That's what being in Wounded Knee taught me, was to be more bold, speak up. Creator didn't make you a mouth and not say nothing, speak up.
That courageous act of defiance was the beginning of a new era. I was in high school in 1973. My parents taught at the Flandreau Indian Boarding School in South Dakota. Suddenly, after the occupation of Wounded Knee, we became proud of our Native American heritage. We learned to bead, a simple but powerful way to embrace culture. In Lincoln, Nebraska, Shirley, Sneve, ICT News.
The National Indian Education Association held its annual Hill Week in Washington, D.C. last week. It's an opportunity for Indigenous leaders to advocate for educational priorities. NIEA members and attendees heard from current members of Congress and other Capitol Hill representatives. I interviewed NIEA Policy Director Julia Wakeford earlier this week to learn about the details and progress made at this year's event.
So NIEA in its origins was created to advocate for all of our students, teachers, and youth, and tribal education departments across the country. And Hill Week is a logical step in that advocacy, where we can connect the people who are experts on the ground, all of those educators and practitioners, with their elected representatives and federal partners, so that their voices can be heard and put on display in the best way.
2023 marks 50 years since the Indian Education Act first became a law. How was that milestone celebrated at Hill Week this year?
Well, we had one of the largest Hill Weeks ever, and that was really exciting for us. We had a number of elected representatives from all across the country come to speak about what is up next. As well, we celebrated the passing of the Durbin-Feeling Native Languages Act and the Native Language Resource Center Act with a celebration and a moving forward to see what is coming next. So I think that's really the way that we are celebrating 50 years, is about buckling down and focusing on what are we still in need of for our students, for our youth, for our children, and how can we best make all of that happen.
I'm really curious if you can describe in more detail what these educators were specifically asking for this year. You mentioned Native languages being a priority, but what else was at the top of the list?
Absolutely. So alongside Native languages, we're always focused on funding and making sure the trust responsibility is upheld in its entirety by the federal government. So really focusing on some of those oversight issues and trying to look into making sure all of the infrastructure across the nation, the buildings, the roads, everything are upheld. And then I know that a lot of our teachers and educators are concerned about educator shortages across the country. This is not just the case in Indian country, but everywhere. And it really feels more dire sometimes in our rural and remote areas. So focusing on what are the best pathways moving forward, how can we create teacher recruitment and retention initiatives, and what can we do to make sure that our own youth, our own college students, are best equipped to be able to perhaps educate their own communities in their future careers.
Tell us about some of the policymakers, specifically the members of Congress who were able to join you this year.
Yeah, we were really excited to have both Representative Peltola and Senator Murkowski from Alaska. Everyone was really excited to see Congresswoman Peltola, as she is the first Alaska Native elected to Congress. And then we also had Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who is the most recent senator and currently the only Native American senator in the country representing the state of Oklahoma, my home state. And then we also had Senator Elizabeth Warren to talk about the Broken Promises report and the bill that she is pushing called Honoring Promises, which would address every stipulation in the Human Rights Commission's Broken Promises report and try and uphold that trust responsibility. We also had Senator Tina Smith, who's been a longtime supporter of Native languages and Native education, and Senator Brian Schatz, of course, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, came to talk about what's on deck for SCIA.
You know, Julia, what strikes me about that list of lawmakers is that they're both Democrats and Republicans. Was that something that was highlighted at Hill Week, sort of the bipartisan nature of Native education?
Absolutely. We always at NIEA focus on bipartisan relationships and how important it is to make sure that wherever our Native folks are in the country, that they are best advocated for and that they have a voice. And the way that we accomplish that is by focusing on that nation-to-nation relationship and not focusing on the politics of Democrats and Republicans.
We only have about a minute left here, but I do want to talk about what next steps are. We know that Hill Week is just a gathering for people to express their concerns and their thoughts, but what comes next after this?
What comes next is we start focusing on appropriations season. The president's budget report just came out on Thursday, and then we move forward with all of those big focuses on the numbers. We invite everyone to join us this fall in Albuquerque, where we will have our annual student days and teacher days alongside NIEA's annual conference. We're really excited to talk about both what is happening with on-the-ground curriculum as well as advocacy and how we continue to push forward.
That was NIEA Policy Director Julia Wakeford. Organizers from the annual IndigiPop X event are celebrating a successful weekend in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Dakota McDowell Wapakichi has this report.
Paintings to comic books to food, the 8th annual IndigiPop X event went off with a bang.
I cannot be more over the moon with the number of folks that have shown up.
Over 500 people attended the event Friday and Saturday. The event's founders said vendors were running out of merchandise because of the number of people visiting.
I think they like seeing people. They love having young people in here. So yesterday, not as many people. So this is a nice, they're kind of just like, oh, people are coming. I was like, they're coming. So this is, rocking and rolling. I think they're all doing great. I know at least a couple of them are like, I've sold out of a lot of things. So I was like, That's what we like to hear.
People from all over traveled to Oklahoma City's First Americans Museum from New Mexico, Connecticut, and Texas. The 2023 Miss Indian Oklahoma Lily Painter traveled from Washington, D.C. to look at the boots and experience something she hadn't experienced before.
I actually really like seeing all the artists. I like knowing that they've come from, wherever they're from, New Mexico, Seattle, trying to come and spread their love for art, but also just kind of inspiring people to do their own art.
And the vendors had a great time. Super Indian comic creator Aragon Starr, whose parents met about 30 miles east of the museum, was signing autographs and talking about having Native representation in pop culture.
I am excited to be part of a contemporary culture and to exhibit that, Native people are still in the game, still doing what we do. And, yes, we love our traditional arts, we love our traditional regalia, we love the past, but we're also embracing the future. And that's kind of what this thing's about.
Now, all three of them say this year's event is one they'll remember.
This reemergence is the highlight of my weekend. This is exactly what I had been hoping for. I am just thrilled.
Kind of like out here blazing trails that are unblazed. We have Comic-Con, but it's never been really indigenized, and so coming in I was really excited.
This has been a really great experience and a really nice homecoming. I am so thrilled to see so many tribal people here.
In Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Dakota McDowell-Wapakichi, ICT News.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.